Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true disturbing stories from Backroad Motels. These are tales of people who ventured into roadside rooms and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. The thing about Backroad Motels is they all smell like the same tired idea. It's that mix of old carpet shampoo, cigarette ghosts that never fully leave, and the lemony cleaner somebody uses like it can erase what happened in the room before you. I'd been driving since early morning, not one of those fun road trips either. More like the kind where you keep telling yourself you're making good time just to stay awake. The sun had that flat late afternoon glare, and my eyes kept doing that thing where the lines on the road start to braid together. I remember stupid details because I was bored. The vending machine ate my dollar and gave it back warm. The ice bucket in my room had a crack down the side like a smile. The coffee in the lobby tasted like burnt plastic, but I drank it anyway because it was free and I was trying to be responsible. There was a plastic fern on the counter, with dust settled into its grooves like it had roots. The motel was called the Meadowline, which was funny because there wasn't a meadow anywhere around it. Just pines pressed tight behind the building like they were leaning in to listen. It sat off a 2-lane highway that didn't have a shoulder in some places, the kind of road where if you drift, you're in a ditch. I wasn't planning to stop there, but my phone had been on 1 bar for a while, and my gas light came on at the exact moment the vacancy sign appeared ahead, buzzing like an insect. Inside the office, the woman at the desk didn't look up right away. She was filing her nails with this slow patience, like it was the only thing keeping her calm. When she finally did look at me, she smiled without using her eyes. "You staying one night?" she asked. "Just one," I said. "Need sleep." She slid the key across the counter. A real key, not a card. The tag was a flat square of wood painted red, and it said 7 in chipped white paint. "Don't leave the curtains open," she said, still smiling, like she was giving me advice about mosquitoes. I tried to laugh. "Lots of bugs out." Her smile didn't change. "Something like that." I told myself it was just small-town weirdness. That's what you do. You shrink things down until they fit in your head. My room was on the end, closest to the woods. I could hear the highway through the wall, occasional tires hissing by, but mostly it was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. When I turned the bathroom light on, it flickered twice before catching. The mirror had tiny black specks in the corners like dead gnats. I tossed my bag on the chair, sat on the bed, and bounced once to test it. The mattress squeaked like it was embarrassed. I checked the locks on the door. Deadbolt, chain, all fine. Then I noticed the curtain, not the curtain itself, the way it hung. The bottom edge was damp. I reached down and touched it and pulled my fingers back fast. It wasn't wet like water, it was slick, like something had rubbed against it over and over, leaving a sheen. I told myself housekeeping used too much spray, or somebody spilled soda, anything. I drew the curtains shut anyway. I showered quick because the water smelled faintly metallic and the pressure kept surging, and crawled into bed with the TV on low. Some late-night infomercial about knives. I remember thinking the host's smile looked forced, which is a dumb thought to have when you're alone in a motel, but that's where my brain was. Sometime after midnight, I think after midnight because I remember seeing the red digits of the clock, I heard a soft sound against the glass. Not a knock, more like fingertips testing the window. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause. I lay still, waiting for it to stop. Wind, maybe, branches, but the taps were too measured, too careful. I slid my hand toward the lamp on the nightstand, ready to click it on like that would solve anything. My heart wasn't racing yet. It was worse than that. It was slow and heavy, like my body was trying to convince itself not to panic. The tapping moved, not louder, just shifted as if whatever was outside had moved from the middle of the window to the far right where the curtain met the frame. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, I heard a whisper. It was my voice, not like a recording, like somebody outside trying to copy the shape of my words. They didn't say anything at first, just breathed in a way that made the syllables of my name form in the throat. And then it said, very softly, "Open it." I sat up so fast the bed springs squealed. My skin went prickly all over and my mouth went dry like I'd swallowed paper. I looked at the curtain, expecting to see a shadow through it, maybe headlights or a person's outline. Nothing. I told myself someone was messing with me, teenagers, a drunk, but the whisper didn't sound drunk. It sounded practiced, like it had been listening to me for a long time and finally decided it was ready to try. "Open it," my voice said again, and it was closer now, right at the glass. I didn't answer, I didn't move. I just stared, holding my breath until my chest hurt. A slow scraping sound started at the bottom of the window, like something dragging a fingernail along the sill. It wasn't a random scrape. It went left to right, then stopped. Then again, like it was measuring. I reached for my phone, forgetting I barely had service. My screen lit up bright in the dark. The second it did, the whisper stopped. The tapping stopped. I waited. A minute, two. Then the curtain moved, not blown by air. There was no air. It moved inward gently, like something had pressed against it from outside, making the fabric bulge into the room. The bottom hem lifted, just slightly. And in that small gap I saw a hand, not a hand like a person's. The skin looked pale, but not human pale, more like the underside of a mushroom. The fingers were too long and too thin, and the joints bent wrong, as if the knuckles were placed in the wrong order. The fingertips were flattened like suction cups, and they stuck briefly to the glass before peeling away with a wet sound. I don't know why that wet sound was what got me. That was the moment my brain finally stopped trying to explain it. The hand slid upward slowly, and the curtain rose with it like it was being lifted carefully. I saw part of a face, no eyes, just smooth skin where eyes should have been, stretched tight over bone, and below that a mouth that wasn't closed, it was split. The lips were parted down the center as if the jaw had been cut and never healed correctly, so it opened like a hinge in two directions. It pressed that mouth against the glass, and the curtain fell back into place like it was relieved. I was off the bed before I fully realized I'd moved. I grabbed my keys, my bag half zipped, and went for the door. My hands were clumsy. I couldn't get the chain undone at first. I kept yanking it like an idiot, making it rattle. That sound felt too loud in the room, like I was announcing myself. Behind me, the tapping started again, faster now, impatient. When I got the chain off and flung the door open, cold air slapped me in the face. The parking lot lights made everything look yellow and sick. My car was right there, a few steps away. And on the pavement, directly outside my door, was a wet footprint. One footprint. It wasn't shaped like a shoe. It wasn't shaped like a bare foot. It was long and narrow with a rounded end, and it looked like it had been pressed down by something that didn't have toes, just a smooth pad. And the strangest part was there were no other prints leading up to it, none leading away. Just that one, like it had appeared mid-step. That's the image that comes back to me sometimes when I'm trying to sleep. One footprint and the rest of the lot perfectly dry. I ran to my car anyway, because what else do you do? I fumbled the keys, hit the panic button by accident, and the car screamed into the night. For a second I thought, great, now it'll come running, but I didn't see it. I didn't look toward the window either. I couldn't make myself. The engine didn't start on the first try. It clicked and my stomach dropped. I tried again. Click again. Finally it turned over, stuttering like it was waking up unwilling. As I backed out, my headlights swept across the motel wall. For a fraction of a second, the beam caught something pressed flat against the outside of my window, a pale shape, too close, like it had been waiting right there. I didn't see eyes. I didn't see movement, just that stretched skin and the impression of a mouth. I hit the gas. Gravel sprayed. I didn't stop until I found a 24-hour truck stop with enough people around that the air felt different. I sat under a buzzing fluorescent light and drank coffee that tasted like pennies. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept checking the door every time it opened. In the morning, and I don't know why I did this, I guess part of me wanted proof, I drove back past the Meadowline in daylight. I didn't pull in, I just slowed enough to look. My room's window was open. I know I left it closed, I know it. The curtain was hanging out of it, fluttering like a flag, and along the bottom edge in full sunlight, I could see the fabric was torn into thin strips, as if something had combed through it with careful, patient fingers. I didn't stop. I didn't go inside. I just kept driving until the motel disappeared in my rearview mirror. Even now, when I'm in a hotel and I hear a small sound at the window, a branch, a bird, anything, I get this sour, metallic taste in my mouth. And I think about that woman at the desk smiling without her eyes, telling me not to leave the curtains open. Story 2. The sign out front said vacancy in half-lit letters, but the lot was empty enough that it looked abandoned. Not ruined, abandoned, more like the place had simply been forgotten by the rest of the world and didn't mind. That's the kind of motel you end up at when your GPS gives up and starts throwing out guesses and you're too tired to argue. I'd been driving a box truck for my brother-in-law's furniture business. Nothing glamorous. Just delivery after delivery, the same ratchet straps biting into my palms, the same cheap energy drinks. That night the sky turned the color of a bruised peach and then went dark fast. I remember thinking I should have stopped earlier, but I kept pushing because the road felt familiar in that way a nightmare can feel familiar, like you've been there before but can't place when. I pulled into this place called Elder Creek Motor Court because my eyelids were doing that heavy blink thing. My legs ached. I'd been sitting too long. The office door was open and a radio was playing low, some old country station with static. The man behind the desk, Armand Tilly, had a face like old leather and a voice that didn't match his size, soft, almost gentle. He handed me a key and asked if I wanted a wake-up call. I said no. I wasn't planning to sleep long, just a few hours. He paused like he was deciding whether to say something. "Don't answer if someone knocks," he finally said. I laughed a little because it sounded like a joke. "Even if it's you." "Especially if it's me," he said, and his eyes flicked toward the hallway like he didn't want to look too long. I told myself it was a quirky safety tip. Maybe they had drifters. Maybe he'd been robbed before. My room smelled like stale soap and something sweet underneath, like rotting fruit. The bedspread had cigarette burns in it. The bathroom had a little bar of soap wrapped in paper, so thin it was almost transparent. I remember these details because I was trying to stay calm, because the air felt wrong, too still. There was a door inside the room I didn't expect, not the bathroom. Another one closer to the dresser, painted the same color as the wall. At first I thought it was a closet, but there was no handle, just a small round knob like a cabinet door. I opened it. It wasn't a closet. It was a crawl space, maybe 2 feet high, going back into darkness. The smell that came out made my eyes water, damp soil, mold, and that same sweet rot. I stared at it for a second too long, then shut it. Old buildings have crawl spaces, that's normal. I ate a pack of crackers from my glove compartment and lay down fully clothed. The TV didn't work, just snow. So I turned it off and listened to the silence. That's when I heard something moving inside the walls, not mice. It was heavier than that, slow and deliberate, like someone crawling, pausing, crawling again. It sounded like fabric rubbing against wood. And it wasn't random. It was coming closer to the wall behind my headboard. I sat up, told myself it was the plumbing, the building settling, anything. Then the knob on the crawlspace door turned, just a quarter turn like someone testing it, and then it turned back. I got off the bed. My heart was starting to do that thumping thing in my throat. I stared at the little door, waiting for it to move again. A soft knock came from the main door. 3 knocks, polite. "Sir," a voice said from outside. "You okay in there?" It sounded like Armand. Same softness, same gentle tone. I exhaled, relieved. That relief felt so strong it was almost embarrassing. Then the voice said, "Sir, could you open up? I need to show you something." I froze with my hand inches from the lock. Something about the sentence didn't fit. You don't say, "I need to show you something" at 1 in the morning at a motel. And Armand had told me not to answer even if it was him. I stepped back, stayed silent. Outside, the voice waited, then it sighed, and the sigh was wrong, too long, like it didn't understand how to stop. "Open," it said, and the tone shifted, not angry, more like curious. Behind me, the crawlspace knob turned again, slowly, as if in agreement. The knocking started again, harder now. The door shook in its frame. The voice stayed soft, almost coaxing. "I can help you," it said. "I can get you where you're going, just open." I backed up until my calves hit the bed. My hands were sweating. I kept thinking maybe this is a prank, but my body didn't believe it. Then I heard a second voice from inside the room, not from the walls, not muffled. It came from the crawlspace door. A wet whisper right at knee height, like something speaking through teeth it didn't know how to use. "Open." I don't know why, but I grabbed the desk chair and jammed it under the doorknob of the main door. Like that mattered. Like wood and cheap metal could protect me. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of my breathing and the faint hum of the parking lot light outside. Then the crawlspace door opened from the inside. Not flung open, eased open, slowly, carefully, as if whatever was inside didn't want to make noise. Something pale slid out. Not a whole body at first, just an arm, impossibly thin, bending at joints that seemed to have too many sections. The skin looked damp. The hand wasn't a hand so much as a cluster of fingers, long and flat, each ending in a dark nail that looked like it had been filed to a point. It reached up and touched the carpet, tested it. Then it pulled itself farther out and I saw a head. The iconic detail, the thing my brain keeps replaying, was the way its face moved. It had a mouth, yes, but it wasn't centered. It was set too far to one side, like someone had stitched it on wrong. And when it smiled, the skin around it didn't crease naturally, it puckered, as if the face was a mask over something else. It turned its head toward me with a smoothness that didn't belong to bones. At the same time, outside the door, the voice that sounded like Armand said very softly, "There you are." I couldn't go out, I couldn't stay in. So I did the only thing my body offered me, I climbed. The room had one window, old and stuck with paint. I threw my shoulder into it. It didn't budge. I hit it again. My shoulder screamed. Behind me, the thing from the crawlspace made a sound like a wet cough, and I felt the bed shift as it put weight on it. On the third hit, the window gave with a crack. Cold air poured in, and I shoved myself through, scraping my hip hard on the frame. I landed in the dirt outside, rolled, got up, and ran barefoot across gravel. The truck was in the lot, big and dumb and comforting. I fumbled for the keys. The office light came on. I saw Armand, the real Armand, standing in the doorway of the office, staring at my room. He didn't chase me, he didn't yell. He just watched, face tight, like he'd been expecting this. I got the truck started and peeled out, tires whining. In the mirror, I saw the motel recede into darkness, but I also saw something else. In my room's window, framed by the broken glass, there was a shape leaning out, pale, too thin. And behind it, in the doorway of the room, there was another shape, taller, darker, like a person standing still. Two of them, coordinated. I drove until dawn. I didn't stop for coffee. I didn't stop to pee. I just drove. A week later, when I finally unpacked my duffel bag, I found something in the bottom that shouldn't have been there. A small round knob, painted the same color as the wall, with splinters of wood still attached. The crawlspace knob. I didn't take it. I swear I didn't. I threw the whole duffel bag away in a dumpster behind a grocery store. And sometimes I still think about that voice outside the door, soft, patient, and how easily it could have tricked me if I'd been just a little more tired. Story 3. Backroad motels in the desert have their own kind of loneliness. The air feels wide, like you could scream and it would just evaporate. That night, the highway was empty enough that my headlights felt pointless, like I was shining them into space. The sky was clear, stars sharp as salt, and the wind kept pushing dust across the road in low sheets. I was on my way to meet my sister for a family thing I'd been dreading, one of those gatherings where everyone pretends nothing is wrong. I'd put it off for weeks. I told myself stopping for sleep was practical, but honestly, I think I was buying time. The motel was called Sunset Palms, which had 2 sad plastic palm trees bolted to the sign. One of them was missing half its fronds. The office had a bell on the counter and a bowl of hard candies that had melted and rehardened into weird shapes. The clerk, Narissa Baines, kept her hair in a tight braid and wore a hoodie despite the heat. She didn't make small talk. She just handed me the key and said, "If you hear a child crying, don't go looking." I remember blinking at her like I didn't understand English. "I don't have kids," I said, which was such a dumb response, but I was tired. She stared at me a second, then looked away. "Still," she said, "my room faced the highway. Across the asphalt beyond the lot, there was open desert and a dry wash that cut through it like a scar. A few scrubby bushes, a fence half collapsed. The kind of landscape that looks empty until you realize how many places something could hide. Inside, the AC rattled like it was full of rocks. The bedspread was sun-faded, patterned with seashells that looked too cheerful for the place. The lampshade had a dead moth stuck inside it. I found a single sock behind the dresser that didn't match mine, gray with little blue anchors. I tossed it in the trash and felt weirdly guilty about it. I ate a microwave burrito from the gas station next door. It was still cold in the middle. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling my phone, watching my battery dip because there was barely any signal. The room had that lonely hum motels get, AC, distant highway, the faint buzz of the vacancy sign. Around 2 a.m., I think it was 2, because the show I fell asleep to was halfway through, I woke up to crying. A child crying, not loud, not dramatic. Just that exhausted, broken, hiccuping sound kids make when they've been crying a while and their throat hurts. It seemed to come from outside, somewhere near the wash. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was a fox, or wind, or some weird bird, but it wasn't an animal sound. It had words in it, not clear words, but the shape of them. "Mama," it sobbed, "Mama." My stomach twisted. Every decent impulse in me wanted to get up, to look, to help. Then I remembered Narissa's warning, and I stayed still. The crying moved closer. Not physically closer like footsteps, more like it was being carried on a string, reeling itself toward my window. The sound grew clearer, like someone was turning up the volume. I got up anyway, not to go outside, just to check the lock, to make sure I was safe, to reassure myself. I kept telling myself that, just checking. My fingers trembled as I pulled the curtain aside a few inches. The parking lot was empty. The desert beyond it was silver under moonlight. And right at the edge of the wash, maybe 50 feet away, there was a small figure standing still. A child-sized shape facing away from me. I couldn't see details, just the outline. It looked like it was wearing a light-colored shirt. The crying stopped. The figure turned its head toward me slowly. And I saw there was something wrong with the head, not a deformity, not gore, just the proportions. The head looked too big, like it had been inflated. And when it turned, the face was flat, featureless, like a blank plate, except for one thing. A single wet line down the middle, like a tear track, except it wasn't coming from an eye. It started at the top of the face and ran down to where a mouth should have been, splitting the blank skin as it went. Then the line opened, like a seam unzipping. A mouth formed vertical, and it stretched wider than a child's face should stretch. The sound that came out wasn't crying anymore. It was my sister's voice. Not Mama, Not begging, just my name said the way she says it when she's disappointed in me. Soft, familiar, like a hook in the ribs. I stumbled back from the window so hard I hit the bed. My chest went tight. I whispered no without thinking, like that mattered. Outside, the voice repeated my name again, closer, and I realized the figure wasn't at the wash anymore. It was in the lot. No footsteps, no transition. Just there, standing under the parking lot light, casting a small, sharp shadow. The iconic detail in this one, the thing that still makes my scalp crawl, was what it did with its arms. It lifted them slowly, like a child asking to be picked up, but the elbows bent the wrong way, folding inward toward the body until the forearms crossed over its head like a broken umbrella. It held that pose, waiting. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on it because every instinct screamed not to look away. I grabbed my keys. My hand was so sweaty I almost dropped them. The doorknob rattled, not from outside, from inside, like something had touched it, testing it just to remind me that the room wasn't mine anymore. I froze. My brain tried to make sense of it. Loose hardware, air pressure, AC shaking the door. None of it fit. The doorknob rattled again. Then the child-shaped thing outside made a sound that wasn't a voice at all, a wet, delighted clicking. I yanked the door open and ran. Not to my car, I don't know why. Maybe because the thing was between me and the lot lights. Maybe because I didn't want to be trapped in a vehicle if it followed. I ran toward the office, barefoot, gravel biting into my soles. The office door was locked. I pounded on it, hard enough to sting my hands. "Help, please." The light inside flicked on. Narissa appeared behind the glass, eyes wide but not surprised. She unlocked the door and pulled me in fast, slamming it behind me. The crying my sister's voice continued outside, circling the building like it was looking for a crack. Narissa didn't ask questions. She just grabbed something from under the counter, a cheap disposable camera, the kind they used to sell at tourist shops. She shoved it into my hands. "Take a picture through the glass," she said, voice shaking. "Now." I hesitated. My hands were clumsy, but I lifted the camera and aimed it through the office window. The child-shaped thing was standing under the lot light, facing the office. I pressed the button. The flash popped. For the first time, the thing reacted, not startled but offended. It tilted its head and the seam mouth closed like a zipper. Then it stepped backward into the darkness beyond the light and it was gone, just like that. No fading, no retreat. Gone. I stayed in the office until the sky started to pale. Narissa gave me water that tasted like it had been sitting in plastic too long. She didn't look at me much. I think she was trying not to attach to anyone who passed through. In the morning, she took the disposable camera into the back room to develop it. She told me to wait. When she came back out, she slid one photo across the counter. It was the parking lot under the light, empty. No child, no figure. But in the lower right corner of the frame, half cut off like an accident, there was my own motel room window. And pressed against the inside of the glass from the inside were two small handprints, pale and wet, as if someone had been standing in my room looking out at the camera. I didn't stay to argue with my own eyes. I left, drove to my sister's, and pretended I was fine. But I still think about that photo sometimes, and the way Narissa wouldn't meet my gaze when she handed it over. Like she knew it wasn't over. Like she knew Backroad Motels don't just hold things, they trade them. Story 4. Rain on a motel roof sounds like someone pacing. That's what I remember first. Not the motel's name, not the town if you can call it that, but the steady, uneven patter overhead, like footsteps that never reached the edge. The air was cold enough that the window glass sweated. My jacket smelled like wet dog because I'd gotten caught in a storm earlier, and the motel heater made everything smell worse when it kicked on. I was on my way back from a failed camping trip, the kind where you show up with optimism and a new headlamp and then realize you hate being damp and alone. I told people I wanted solitude, but honestly I think I just wanted to feel like the sort of person who enjoys it. The motel Cinder Ridge Inn sat at the base of a forested hill with a creek somewhere behind it. You couldn't see the creek, but you could hear it, low and constant. The desk clerk, Holly's Ibarra, had a sore-looking red eye like he'd been rubbing it too hard. He gave me my key and asked if I was staying in my room tonight. I said, "Yeah, I'm tired." He nodded like that was the correct answer, like there were wrong ones. My room had a little desk bolted to the wall, a cracked vinyl chair, and a smell like damp wood. I set my boots near the heater to dry and watched steam curl off them. I ate beef jerky. The salt stung my lips because they were chapped from the cold. Around midnight, the rain eased. The creak got louder. That's when I heard the first knock, not on the door, on the wall. A single, firm knock, like a neighbor complaining about noise. I sat up, listened. Another knock, slightly lower, then another lower still, like something was working its way down the wall, tapping each section as it went. I told myself it was plumbing, the heater shifting, the building settling after the rain. Then I noticed the wallpaper. It had tiny bubbles in it like trapped air pockets. I stared at them longer than I should have because the bubbles were moving, not rising like heat, sliding slowly down the wall toward the baseboard. I felt my stomach flip, but I still tried to rationalize it. Moisture, old glue, the heat loosening it. The knocking reached the baseboard, and then it started scratching. A steady, patient scratch at floor level, like someone dragging a fingernail through wood. I got off the bed and crouched, pressing my ear near the wall. The sound stopped instantly, as if it knew I was listening. A soft voice came through, not clear but close. "Let me in." It wasn't threatening. It sounded tired, like someone asking to come in out of the rain. I backed away, heart thudding. "No," I whispered, even though I knew it couldn't hear me, or maybe it could. The scratching started again, and this time it wasn't on the wall, it was under the bed. I jerked back so hard I hit my shin on the frame. Pain shot up my leg. I stood there frozen, staring at the dark gap beneath the bedspread. Then something slid out from under the bed. Not a body, a strip of something. At first I thought it was a belt. Then I realized it was skin, long, pale, and stretched thin like wet leather. It moved like a tongue, searching the carpet, tasting the air. The iconic moment here was the sound it made when it found the heater's warm air stream. It made a soft, pleased sigh, and the sigh had my ex's laugh woven into it, like it had sampled old memories and picked one it thought would work. I grabbed my boots, my bag, and didn't even put the boots on. I ran barefoot into the hallway, heater still blasting behind me. The hallway was empty, lit by buzzing lights. The carpet squished under my feet. I ran to the office and banged on the window. Holly's opened the door just enough to look out, chains still on. His face went pale when he saw my bare feet and wet pants. "You heard it," he said, not a question. "It's in my room," I said, voice cracking. "Under the bed." He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "it's under the building." Then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped outside with me, into the rain-cooled air. He led me around the side of the motel to a small access hatch near the foundation. He didn't open it, he just pointed. There were scratch marks in the mud below the hatch. Long, parallel grooves like something had been dragged out and back in over and over. And the mud was disturbed in a spiral pattern like someone had been turning in place. "Drive," Holly said. "Don't look back. Don't go in that room for your shoes. Buy new ones." I listened. I drove until my feet stopped bleeding. The next day, when I looked at the soles of my feet, I found something embedded in one heel. A tiny sliver of wood, dark and rotten, with a single hair stuck to it, white, thick, not mine. I pulled it out with tweezers, and it came out with a wet little pop, like it had been rooted. I still don't know what was under that building. I don't want to. But sometimes, when rain hits my roof at night, I can't sleep because it sounds like pacing. Story 5. The motel I'm talking about wasn't even on my map. That's the weird part. I was using an old paper atlas because my phone had died. I'd forgotten my charger, and my car's USB port only worked when it felt like it. I'd been flipping pages at a gas station, trying to figure out which road would get me back toward the interstate, when a man in a camo jacket leaned over the counter and said, "You don't want to take 19 at night?" He said it like advice, like he cared. I asked why. He shrugged and bought a pack of gum, so I took 19 at night anyway because that's what people do. I wasn't reckless exactly, just tired and stubborn. An hour later I saw the motel sign, Blue Heron Lodge. No other lights around it except the neon heron that blinked on and off like it was losing faith. The parking lot was gravel, the kind that crunches loud enough to announce you. The office was a small cabin with a porch. A woman named Saskia checked me in. She had a cigarette behind her ear and hands stained with something dark, motor oil maybe. "Room 3, she said. "Don't walk behind the building." "What's behind the building?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Saskia stared at me a second too long. "Wet ground," she said. "It'll swallow your shoes." I took that as the kind of exaggerated warning locals give. Like, don't pet the raccoons and don't drink the tap water. Room 3 had a small window that looked out onto trees and reeds. I realized then that there must be water nearby, a marsh or a slow river. The air smelled like wet plants and old algae. I ate trail mix. I watched some terrible sitcom reruns. I tried to fall asleep. Around 1 a.m. I heard something outside my window, not footsteps, more like a dragging sound, soft but persistent, like something being pulled through wet grass. Then a knock on the glass, just one knock. I sat up, heart thumping. I told myself it was Saskia, maybe checking something, or an animal. Another knock, same spot. I edged toward the window and pulled the curtain aside a fraction. A face was inches from the glass. It looked human at first, a woman's face, wet hair plastered to her cheeks. Her skin was pale, but not corpse pale, more like someone who'd been in cold water too long. Her eyes were open wide, staring straight at me. I inhaled sharply. She opened her mouth, and water poured out, not drool, not a trickle. A steady stream like her throat was a hose, spilling down the glass in thick rivulets. But she didn't choke, she didn't blink. The iconic detail, in the water that ran down the window, I saw tiny fish minnows wriggling alive as if they'd been held inside her and were now escaping. I stumbled back, hitting the dresser. The woman's mouth kept pouring water. Her eyes never moved. Then her voice came through the glass, muffled but clear enough. "Let me dry," she said. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. Her hand lifted, slow, palm flat against the window. Her fingernails were cracked and muddy, and the skin of her fingers, I don't know how to describe it. It looked softened, like it had been soaking for days, white and wrinkled. I backed toward the door, grabbed my keys, and got out into the night. The air was damp and smelled like rot. Somewhere behind the building, I heard that dragging sound again, closer than it should have been. I ran to the office, pounding on the door. Saskia opened it, eyes narrowed like she already knew what I was going to say. "She's at my window," I blurted. "There's a woman, she's..." Saskia held up a hand. "Don't describe her," she said sharply. "Don't talk about her like she's a person." My skin crawled. "What is she?" Saskia's jaw tightened. "Don't," she said again. Then she grabbed a flashlight and a set of keys and marched toward my room like she was angry, not scared. I followed a few steps behind, not wanting to be alone but not wanting to be close either. When we got there, the window was empty, no face, no water, but the ground beneath the window was soaked as if a bucket had been poured out there, and in the wet gravel there were drag marks leading toward the reeds behind the building. Saskia shined her flashlight on the marks and swore under her breath. "You leaving?" she asked, not looking at me. "Yes," I said immediately. She nodded once. "Good." I didn't sleep that night. I drove until the sun came up. A few days later, when I was cleaning out my car, I found something under the passenger seat. A single wet reed, still green, twisted into a loose knot like someone had tied it on purpose. It didn't smell like my car. It smelled like pond water. I threw it away, but that smell lingered for hours. Story 6. I took the job because it was easy money. That's what I told myself. One night of security out in the sticks, watch a closed motel while the owners deal with paperwork. Something like that. I was between gigs. My rent was due. Easy money makes you do dumb things. The motel was called the Juniper Rest, and it sat off a gravel road behind a shuttered diner. The kind of place you'd expect to see in a postcard from 1978. The pool was empty, filled with leaves. The office had a bulletin board with faded flyers for yard sales that had happened years ago. The owner, a nervous guy named Calder Voss, handed me a ring of keys and told me the cameras were spotty. What am I actually watching for? I asked, trying to sound professional. Calder hesitated. Just make sure nobody goes into room 12, he said. I asked why. He shook his head. Door sticks, he said, like that explained it. The first few hours were boring. I sat in the office with a space heater pointed at my legs. I ate chips that tasted like cardboard. I scrolled my phone until the battery died. I listened to the building settle and the wind scraped dry branches against the siding. Around 11, the hallway light flickered, just once, then it steadied. I told myself the wiring was old. At midnight, one of the cameras, the one aimed at the back walkway, popped into clear focus for a second, like it remembered how to work. I glanced up at the monitor and saw something that made my stomach clench. There was a person standing at the end of the walkway, just standing there facing the camera. I leaned closer. The image fuzzed, then cleared again. The person didn't move, no shift of weight, no blink, just a still figure under the weak security light. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the hallway. My shoes squeaked on the cheap tile. I told myself it was a trespasser, a homeless person, a drunk. I walked toward the back door, hand on the handle, listening. Nothing. I opened it. The walkway was empty. No person, no movement, only wind and the faint smell of dust. I went back inside, annoyed at myself for reacting. When I looked at the monitor again, the figure was back, closer now, halfway down the walkway. I stared, trying to make sense of it. The camera angle hadn't changed, the lighting hadn't changed, but the figure had, and the worst part was the way it stood. The shoulders were slightly too high, like they were being held up by tension. The neck looked elongated. The head tilted at an angle that made my own neck ache just looking at it. I swallowed hard, forced myself to breathe. "Bad camera," I whispered. Then the figure raised its hand, not toward the camera, toward the door, like it knew where I was. I backed away from the monitor without meaning to. My skin prickled. I heard a sound down the hall, a door handle turning. Slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to wake anyone. Room 12. I stood frozen for a second, because I knew Calder had told me not to let anyone in there, and I also knew I wasn't paid enough for whatever this was, but my body moved anyway. I walked down the hall, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand, and stopped in front of room 12. The door wasn't opening. It was vibrating subtly, like someone inside was pressing against it. The knob turned again, and this time I heard a soft click. The deadbolt was engaged from the inside, but it clicked like it was being unlocked. I took a step back. My throat went tight. The door cracked open just an inch, and cold air spilled out, cold enough to raise goosebumps instantly. A voice came from the gap. It sounded like me, not exactly, but close enough that it made my stomach drop. "Hey," it said softly. "It's okay, come in." I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. The door opened a little more. I saw darkness inside, no light, no shape. Then something slid into the gap, not a face, but a piece of fabric. A strip of motel curtain, floral print hanging out like a tongue, and the fabric was moving, not fluttering, breathing. The iconic moment. On the edge of that curtain strip there were small teeth marks, perfectly spaced, as if something had been chewing it with a human mouth, but far too many teeth. I backed away and the voice followed me, still soft. "Come in," it said. "You're safe." The camera monitor in the office suddenly shrieked with static, a loud burst that echoed down the hallway like a scream. I took that as permission from the universe to leave. I ran, not heroic, not strategic, just ran. I got to the office, grabbed my jacket, grabbed my keys, and bolted out the front door. My car was in the lot. The engine started on the first try, thank God, and I peeled out onto the gravel road. In the rearview mirror, I saw the motel sign flicker. And in the darkness near the sign, I saw a figure, the same one from the camera, standing perfectly still, head tilted, watching my taillights vanish. The next day, Calder called me. I didn't answer. A week later, I got my jacket back from the car wash. The attendant handed it to me with a weird look and said, "You got something stuck in the lining." At home, I cut the lining open. Inside was a motel key tag, flat wood, painted red with 12 in chipped white paint. I never took it. I never went into room 12, so I don't know how it got there. Story 7. There's a kind of motel you only find when you've made a wrong turn you can't admit was a wrong turn. The road narrows, the trees crowd in, and suddenly your headlights are the only thing drawing lines in the world. I'd been following my buddy's directions, not GPS, because he swore he knew a shortcut to this cabin we were supposed to meet friends at. It was stupid. We were both old enough to know better, but we were also both the kind of people who think getting lost is part of it. By the time we saw the motel, it was close to midnight. The sign said Pine Hollow Rooms, and the bulbs were so dim it looked like the letters were sinking into darkness. The lot had 3 cars, all parked far apart like they didn't trust each other. My buddy, Deacon Parrick, stretched his arms and said, "We crash for a few hours, then keep going. Easy." Inside the office, an elderly man named Luther Kwan checked us in. His hands shook slightly as he wrote our room number. 2 beds, I said. "Just for the night." Luther slid the key over and then hesitated, eyes flicking between me and Deacon. "If you hear someone walking outside your door," he said quietly, "don't open it." Deacon laughed. "Is this like a local ghost thing?" Luther didn't smile. "It's a local not opening your door thing," he said. We took the key and went to the room, still joking a little, because humor is what you do when you don't want to admit you're uneasy. The room was basic, 2 beds, a TV bolted to the dresser, a small table with a lamp that had a dent in the shade. I remember noticing a tiny stack of paper cups wrapped in plastic, like someone had tried to make the place feel clean. Deacon tossed his bag on one bed. I sat on the other and pulled off my shoes. My socks smelled like the inside of my boots, which isn't a poetic detail, just true. We argued for 5 minutes about whether to keep the AC on. Deacon wanted it cold. I wanted it off because the fan made a clicking noise. We compromised by leaving it on low, then we tried to sleep. At around 2, I woke up because Deacon was sitting upright in bed, staring at the door. "What?" I whispered, half asleep. He held up a hand for silence, and that's when I heard it, footsteps in the hallway, slow, barely there, like someone walking in socks. They stopped outside our door. We held our breath. The doorknob turned gently like a test, then it stopped. A voice came through the door, soft and friendly. "Hey," it said. "You guys okay in there?" Deacon started to answer, reflex, politeness, but I grabbed his arm hard. He looked at me, irritated, then saw my face and shut his mouth. The voice continued. "I think you left your lights on in the car." Deacon frowned. He mouthed, "We didn't." The knob turned again. The chain rattled slightly. "Open up," the voice said, still calm. "Just want to help." I stared at the peephole. The hallway light was on. If someone was out there, we should have seen a shadow under the door. There was no shadow. The voice shifted, as if trying on a new tone, and suddenly it sounded like Deacon. Not close, not kind of. Exactly like him. "Bro," the voice said in Deacon's voice, "open the door." Deacon's eyes went wide. He shook his head slowly like he couldn't process it. Then the voice changed again into mine. "Open it," it said, my own tired voice, the exact cadence I use when I'm annoyed. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like nausea. We didn't move. We didn't speak. Outside, something scraped against the door, not a claw, more like a hard object being dragged vertically. Then very softly, something slid into the gap at the bottom of the door. A thin strip of paper, like someone slipping a note. It stopped halfway in as if it wanted us to take it. I stared at it for a long time, heart hammering. Deacon shook his head fast, mouthing, "Don't, but curiosity is a nasty thing." I reached down and grabbed the paper with 2 fingers and pulled it in quickly. It wasn't a note, it was a photograph, a glossy photo, slightly damp. It showed our room from inside, taken from the corner near the ceiling, like from an angle we couldn't reach. Deacon and I were in the photo, asleep in our beds, except the photo was wrong, because in the photo the door was open and something was standing in the doorway. Not a person, not exactly. Its shape was tall and narrow, but the edges of it looked blurred, like smoke trying to hold a human form. And where its face should have been, there was a reflective surface, like a mirror, catching the room's light and reflecting not the room but the hallway behind it. The iconic detail is burned into me. In that mirror face, I could see a row of doors down the hallway, and every door was open, like mouths. Deacon made a sound in his throat like a sob he swallowed. The footsteps started again, moving away, slow and satisfied. We didn't sleep after that. We sat with the lights on until dawn, backs against the wall, like 2 kids trying to pretend the closet can't open if you stare at it. In the morning, we went straight to the office to confront Luther. He wasn't there. The office was empty. The bell on the counter was gone. The candy bowl was gone, like it had never been staffed. A new woman sat behind the desk, Maria Salcido, and when we asked about Luther, she frowned like we were making him up. "No one named Luther works here," she said. Deacon started to argue, but I pulled him away. I didn't want to be the guys yelling in a motel lobby about a man who must exist. We got in the car and left. We never made it to the cabin. 2 days later, when I was unpacking my bag, the photograph fell out of the side pocket, the one I swear I'd emptied. But it wasn't the same photograph. This one showed my apartment hallway, taken from that same ceiling corner angle, like an insect's view. My front door was open, and in the doorway there was a tall shape with a mirror for a face, reflecting a row of doors that don't exist in my building. I locked my door, I checked the chain, and I didn't sleep much after that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.